Sam Strong, thanks for joining us. Sitting here in Queensland Theatre, it's been a few years now. Tell us how the journey's been so far.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. I'm loving being in Brisbane, having an enormous amount of fun here. I've just programmed my second season and the results have just come in for the first season, which was 2017. And it was our biggest year ever in the history of the company, which we're incredibly proud of. We played to about 190,000 people across 55 theatres around Australia and around the world. And even more than that, I think we've officially claimed the title of the fastest growing theatre company in Australia. So of all the major theatre companies around Australia, we had the fastest growth or the highest growth in our season ticket holders or subscribers. So yeah, we're on a bit of a roll at the moment, but even more importantly than that, I'm having great fun.
Yeah, that's exciting. Do you think you can credit that to anything in particular? Is it just coming in with new energy?
It's all wonderful programming. It's entire. Take as much credit for it as I possibly can. No, I think, of course, the content of the program is important. I think also that we moved to a program that was just one unified program. So rather than try and divide up what we do for audiences, give them studio seasons or main stage seasons, we said we're just going to give an audience one thing, one offering, so 9 shows. And what that means at a company like ours is that aesthetic envelope of those 9 shows is really wide. So in 2017, for example, that span from a play as radical and provocative as an octoroon to something as relatively traditional as Noises Off. So I think that presenting a unified program was one thing, the content of that program, but also I think the new identity and getting our name and our identity around Brisbane and indeed around Australia as much as we possibly could.
What's the process like for programming a season? Is there a lot of catering? Or catering's probably a bad word, but do you feel you have to? You know what I'm saying?
No, I do. I think curation of a season is in a way a kind of really dark art, and it's that kind of dark art that the more you talk about it, the more the mystery kind of gets revealed. But no, for me, it's a really interesting balance between listening and catering to what you imagine people will want, and on the other hand, completely and entirely trusting your own instinct. Because the only way that you can really speak to an audience is through trusting your instinct about what you think will speak to an audience. So yes, I do think very carefully, and the team here thinks very carefully about who we're speaking to. A case in point of a play like Constellations in the 2017 season, which puts kind of Gen Y experience on stage, and you hope that audience will come to that show. But on the other hand, it is as simple as programming works that we like. And I think another really important part of curation that's often undervalued is the journey across, I know journey is such an overused word, but the journey across a season. So I like to think of a season as an album, back when people bought albums, which is a while ago, but it's a really carefully curated series of experiences across a year. So you're thinking about the order of those experiences, and you're thinking about the variety of those experiences. What is going to move an audience, what is going to challenge an audience, what's going to delight an audience, what's going to provoke them, what's going to entertain them, what's going to kind of push them into places they didn't think they were going to go.
What do you, I guess to put it simply, what do you say to young actors who want to be involved? I mean, you've now worked with a lot of the big companies who want to get more involved doing theatre, especially at this sort of level.
Yeah. Well, I think there's the official story, which is, there are points of entry into companies like ours in terms of general auditions. And one of the first things I did when I arrived here is that we started doing general auditions together with Le Boite. So as a way of saying for young actors, you don't need to audition twice. Come and see both companies in one hit. So companies take their obligation and their responsibilities to new talent really seriously. So it's part of our job to get out there and see people and meet people and be as accessible as we can. So there's the kind of official story in terms of a kind of company point of entry. But I think even more than that, if I was to give 2 bits of advice, it would be see as much stuff as you can and make your own work. I think there is no substitute for getting together with peers and putting a show on and then getting people to come and see it. I think that's a really important part of any actor's trajectory, and that's a way of us seeing what people want to do, what people are passionate about, and I think also seeing where you possibly can, seeing work by the company. And we and most companies around Australia are like this now, where we know our tickets are expensive, so we will try to have some sort of accessible ticket scheme. So I think one of the things we did last year was 9 plays for $90. And so I think it's making an investment in the industry that you want to be part of, but knowing that industry takes its responsibility to you really seriously as well.
So I'd love to just chat specifically, because I think people, especially maybe drama school grads or people who are at that professional level, how important are generals? Do you feel, I always feel looking at them that there must be such a huge amount of actors you're seeing that it would be hard to stand out or hard for it to make any impact?
No, I think it really does. And I think about actors that I've seen come through generals that I have eventually cast in things, and that casting might take 2 or 3 or maybe even more in some instances. But I think it's a really good way to be seen by a company and to get your work in front of people. And I think sometimes people can take auditions, and I understand that people can be very nervous about an audition or see an audition as a kind of be-all and end-all. But I think actually thinking of that as some sort of ongoing conversation with a company sometimes takes the edge off those nerves. So, an audition for us is just one touch point with an actor's work. Going out and seeing what they're doing is another one. Getting people in for specific auditions is another one. A lot of people can self-test as well these days. But I think the general audition is still really important, and it's also an important way for us as a company to say we want to make ourselves as accessible as we possibly can. In fact, I'm doing some graduate auditions this afternoon, and we're doing some yesterday. And even more simply than that, it's actually a chance for us to watch people act all day, which is kind of it's great to be able to do that. And I think if you're cynical about watching people share their work with you, then you should be doing something else. It's a beautiful thing to get to watch people act.
So let's go into that a little bit. If an actor comes in, obviously, especially in a general scenario where you might be seeing 30, 40 more a day?
Yeah.
What are you, over the years, is there things that stand out for you, things you're looking for in that audition?
Oh, look, and again, for me, it's really quite basic about someone capturing your attention. So how the question then becomes, how do you capture someone's attention, which is the obvious question. I think staying away from work that turns up quite a bit in auditions. So maybe choosing something a bit different is always good. Knowing that if you're going to tackle some of those really classic monologues, if you're trotting out a Hamlet or whatever, that you know that the people will have seen a lot of it. So try and do something different with it. Make a kind of left field choice potentially. I think the sort of softer side of an audition is actually really important as well, in terms of how you just say hello to people and kind of enter a room. Because from my side of an audition, even in a general, I'm just sort of working out whether I can kind of want to hang out with a person for 6 weeks in a room, and that works both ways as well. Like if there's an actor in that room, you're going, this person's a bit of a jerk, and I don't want to spend 6 weeks in a room with them. Then you probably should trust that.
Yeah, I think generals are kind of, I guess, a little bit unique, because I think I was interested to talk about, because I think there's a bit of a movement, I guess maybe more in a screen audition, of people talking about, coming in and owning the room and sort of leaving your energy in the room. And I wonder, I'm sort of in two minds. I can kind of see how that could be effective, but at the same time I go, exactly as you're talking about, that to just be a genuine person and be someone to work with. And
it's always a really fine balance, because it is true that you want to be authentic, and you when you're not doing the acting part, you want to be kind of yourself. But if yourself is kind of slightly introverted or difficult, then it's good to make some sort of effort to kind of not be that. So yeah, it is a bit of a kind of delicate balance. But I think another side of auditioning is that so much, and I kind of marvel at pretty much any actor's ability to do this, and to yield to this, is that so much of it is outside of your control. and you can sort of second guess what people are looking for, and it's quite as simple as so much of it is outside of your control, and you have to kind of yield to that process and know that you might do, and just do the best work that you possibly can, and then offer that up to the universe and know that it will work itself out at some point. And also that and this is the thing I marvel at a lot of actors as well, and understand as a kind of freelance director as well, is that you, in any artistic discipline, miss out on things that you would do a good job of. And I think that's just and I think that's sometimes quite hard, as we know, to articulate that to people who aren't from our industry. Is that part of what we do is to go, I've imagined myself into that job. I know I could smash it. I get in there in the audition, I do a kind of wonderful job in the audition, and then I don't get it. Or I pitch this great show to said company, and then someone else directs something else in its place. I think one last bit of advice actually on an audition too is that, and it's to your point about kind of owning the room or not owning the room. I think never apologise for what you've done. I think that's part of owning a room. Like, start again if you need to start again or whatever. But also, I've been in so many auditions when someone has apologised for something that's wonderful, and they've unnecessarily said, "Oh, that was crap," or I'm sorry, or I messed that up, and it was like, no, it was great actually. So I think that's a really good bit of kind of practical advice is, just own what you've done, even if internally you feel like it was terrible. Kind of go, no, that was my work, and I put that out there, and I did the best that I could at that moment. Yeah.
Well, we chatted with Les Chantry in the past, and he talks about forgetting lines and making those kind of mistakes is often a gift, because it brings out a moment that is unique or interesting.
Completely, and don't beat yourself up about that. Just keep going.
So moving into the rehearsal room and working professionally once an actor's cast, what do you love to see in an actor that you're working with? Is there some qualities that you look for or you love?
Again, it's as simple as I kind of just love working with actors that I enjoy hanging out with in a room. And if even on the darkest of content, if a rehearsal room is not safe and joyous and fun, then you're kind of doing something wrong. And I think that's partly my job to engineer that environment. But I think it's an actor's job to do that as well. And if to talk about one quality, it would be kind of this is two qualities, kind of proactivity and invention, bringing stuff, and not kind of sitting back and waiting and going, no, I'm going to throw this out there. I'm going to make an offer about what I think this should be. But then also, everyone's done their preparation. They're working hard, and they come in and they come to the table with something. But also they're kind of agile and not precious as well. So the greatest rehearsal rooms are those ones where you can go, you take it incredibly seriously. Everyone's kind of very, very well prepared, but you can also just go, oh man, that one was a bit shit, wasn't it? Or that that was a terrible idea. And that includes that's true for me as a director as well. And that the most kind of fertile, it's such a cliche, but the most fertile creative environments are those ones where you can kind of throw stuff out there and then throw stuff out as well.
Yeah. I think it takes a long time. I mean, it's been interesting because we've been doing a bit more teaching, for younger actors, and you start to realise that giving someone a critique, you genuinely want to help them. And I think so many actors feel that unless they get it perfect, unless they get you nailed that it's bad. But in actual fact, it's just moulding, or it's just working with someone in it. Would you say your directing style is like that, in that you prefer, like you say, people to make choices and you almost steering the process rather than...
No, absolutely. And my directing got much better when I was predetermining less outside of the room. And I used to, and this is true of a lot of main stage stuff that I made earlier in my career, where I would kind of arguably overthink things, and I would unnecessarily predetermine and sometimes that's a function of having to design a large set 6 months before you hit rehearsal. But my direction got much better when I created more space for actors to come to the process, for something to be more organic. Even if you are, and I'm often in a main stage environment, you are having to make design choices in advance of cast arriving, but I tend to try and do that in a way that doesn't box us into anything, so it leaves space for an actor to bring something to the table. And even if you've got a very detailed, or you have to have a very detailed storyboard of what this complex revolve plot will be, because that's been necessary to build it, I won't put that in the room straight away, and I'll let the kind of room find something, because it's invariably better. Yeah. Because what I discovered through experience and practice is that my solo imagination is never as interesting as the collective imagination that comes from kind of getting a cast on something. And what's coming from a room, if you're shutting yourself off from what's coming from a room, you're inevitably going to make stuff that's less interesting.
Changing gear a little bit, for young directors, young theatre directors, has there been some big lessons, obviously, so far that you would say to young directors or directors starting out? What would be the process to get to where you're at, running a theatre company of this scale?
Yeah, I think there is actually no substitute for doing and for making. And one of the most spectacularly obvious but spectacularly helpful pieces of directorial advice I ever got was the best way to learn how to direct plays is to direct plays. Which is, again, that's not necessarily kind of solid gold wisdom, but it is actually, because you learn through doing and you learn through making, and so I think there's no substitute for getting together with a bunch of peers. It's not dissimilar to the acting advice, and putting on a show and making something. I think that's important. I think knowing the kind of the landscape that you operate in is important. I think assistant directing is a kind of important part, or observing is an important part of a directorial trajectory. Training at some sort of institution is useful. But there is really, at the end of the day, actually just doing it is kind of the best way.
And when you talk about learning from it, for you, has that been a lot of kind of self-reflection, or are you looking at things like reviews and things like ticket sales, or a mix of that?
I think it sort of depends a bit on the stage of your directorial career that you're at, and I think as you start to make work on a main stage, and as you start to make work for larger audiences, then the amount of feedback or noise around that work increases exponentially. So, if you've got 30,000 people seeing a show, even if you're on, that's a solid amount of tweets if you're following that, or if or let alone whether you're kind of reading reviews or. So I think it's important to find a way to manage reception, I think, and not get drowned in the amount of information that you can get about your work, positive and negative. And so I think one of the ways that I work with that is I will have things that I want to achieve in any given show. I should say too, when you're operating in a main stage context, there are various forms of success, kind of external success, I suppose. There are, there's, did your show make its box office target and make the money that it was supposed to make? Was your show kind of, well received by the kind of industry and critically? And then there's other things that you're kind of wanting to achieve with that show. And I think, I've had every conceivable variation on the and then there's, most importantly, I should say, there is how you feel about it. And I think as you grow in experience and maturity as a director, you just you get more in tune with how you feel about a work, rather than how everyone else feels about a work, and you stop worrying as much about how everyone else feels about a work. And I think you and different people have different views on this, but I think part of that is actually just from my perspective was through making a kind of body of work and having every conceivable variation, which is shows that I was really proud of that got disastrously reviewed, or shows that I was kind of a bit iffy about that got wonderfully reviewed. The only thing you can do in the face of all of that, all of those variations and all of those people and things telling you about your work, is just ask yourself, well, how do I feel about what I made? And did I achieve what I wanted to achieve in that show?
StageMilk is now at a point where we get so many questions about people going, oh, I want to be a better actor. And sometimes it's hard to articulate what good acting is. And I wonder if that's a simple enough question. But what you feel is I guess the exciting thing about acting, and what we're all striving for as actors.
Yeah, I think one of the really challenging things, but it's a challenging and both a beautiful thing about our art form, is that it is really hard to identify good and kind of bad acting. It's even harder to shift kind of what you perceive to be bad acting into good acting. But there is an element of subjectivity to it. How do you get better at it? One response is to go and see good acting. It's a slightly circular argument, but something that is to go and see particular actors work, and see particular actors work across a body of work as well. So to kind of see, all right, that's what someone's done in that show, or that's what someone's done in that show. Again, it comes back to directing a little bit, but one of the best ways that you can hone your directorial craft is to go and note someone else's show. Anyone else's show. Go and watch someone else's show and note it as if it's a preview of your own show. And that's just for yourself. No one's ever going to see it. But you're going in and going, actually, yeah, what notes would I give to this cast on this show, as a way of kind of honing your diagnostic skills. So there's a version of that as an actor too, where watch a performance that you really admire and try and specifically dig down into it. Like, what are you admiring about it? And particularly if it's a text that you know, get hold of the text and go, all right, what has that person done with that text? What have they done with that line? Where's their emphasis landing? How have they broken it up? So it's kind of like you can do a bit of reverse engineering about people's good choices and go, okay, here's the text, here's the blueprint. I've watched that. You can do that on screen, of course, as well. Like, I've watched what they've done with that, and I'm like, oh wow, okay. Well, they paused there when I wouldn't have thought that would make sense to pause there. And so, I think you can reverse engineer other people's good performances. What makes a good performance? I think there is an element of danger or unpredictability to a good performance. You don't know where it's going, or what it's doing. I think that's again, it's very hard to engineer that, because part of that is just sort of innate. But I think left field choices, again, finding ways to kind of break things up. Variations, there's a whole lot of kind of craft answers to that. Where you go, keeping an eye on variations of tempo or rhythm in a longer speech, for example, of like, you know that the ear will naturally get lulled into something that sits in a similar tempo for a while. So how do you break it up? How do you kind of keep people interested? So there, and I think you can learn a lot of that by watching someone else. Yeah.
Trained actors versus untrained. Have you noticed any differences in when you're directing actors who have gone to maybe a 3-year drama school compared to?
On the one hand, there are sort of some technical differences where, someone's done 3 years worth of voice training, or someone's done, 3 years worth of movement training. But, I think I've worked with kind of less formally trained or untrained people who are just as fascinating and captivating and interesting and dynamic. And often as a director in a main stage environment, you tend to be kind of very methodologically impure, which is a really pompous way of saying, I don't kind of get into a room and go, we're all doing kind of Meisner or something, I don't kind of, just because you've got such a cocktail of different, and sometimes if you're doing a big show, you've got, age ranges from 21 to 81. So you've got some very different acting approaches, and my job as a director is to kind of work with all of those different methodologies. So if I'm, I don't know, there are different sort of directors who are very much like, that sort of auteur thing where this is my kind of process, but I tend to kind of be very eclectic, I suppose, in methodology or process.
Yeah. Have you noticed any sort of common traits in maybe areas that actors are lacking or could work more? I know a lot of people talk about sort of vocal work, especially for theatre, when we're moving into so many actors are auditioning for screen and film.
Yeah. I think there's that obvious stuff about kind of vocal work, and I think also seeing ongoing training as just part of your professional development. Some actors will get out of drama school and they'll kind of just like stop. And they go like, no, you can always, and then you see there's other actors who are, even if they're like, their voice work is impeccable, they'll keep going and doing stuff. They'll keep going and doing classes. They'll keep working and refining. And I think that's a really, how you keep yourself fit performatively is really important, because it's no secret that kind of work begets work in a way. And I think part of that is that people are fit. So in the inevitable downtimes, how do you kind of keep yourself working? So there are lots of, there's the kind of technical answer to that, which is, I might go out and do a class, or I might, keep doing yoga, or I might do whatever. There's that side of it. Then there's also the kind of less formal preparation, in that the great upside of not being employed as an actor, subject to the kind of day job that you've got to do to pay your rent, is that you might have a bit more time on your hands that will then go away at some point when you're kind of crushed with too much work. But using that time effectively and going, I'm going to go and watch Tarkovsky's body of work. That's a pompous example, but going, I'm going to go and watch all those great films that I haven't yet watched, because that's actually part of my development as an actor. Or I'm going to go and watch all the Academy Award nominees this year to help answer that question of kind of what good acting is, and all of that stuff. Yes, it's a tax kind of write-off, but it's sort of it's a less tangible but nevertheless really important part of your professional development as an artist. Well, Sam Strong, thanks so much for taking some time. No, absolute pleasure. I could get to talk about plays and acting and theatre, so it was an absolute delight. So thank you.
Thanks.